Bună ziua, doamnelor și domnilor, și
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the press conference to which the Prime Minister of Romania, Nicolae Ciuca, General Secretary of the OECD, Mr. Matias Cormann is present. For the very beginning, Mr. Prime Minister, please. General Secretary of OECD in collaboration, Mr. Matias Cormann, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I've had today the pleasure to host the Secretary General of OECD 3 days after the OECD Council has decided to initiate the negotiation to join the OECD to Romania. It is the very first political objective of the policy that will go from the short time period of the mandate. OECD is reuniting member states, 70 points, when it comes to 90% of the foreign investments that have been directly made to our country. It represents a pole of attractivity from qualitative points, and it represents through the prestige that it has, the economical points, and equally it is offering to our citizen the perspective of belonging to a system of democratic values that will generate in the member states stability and perspective for durable development. The initiation of the joining talks for the OECD is a success on its own. This will attest to the importance that the Romanian state is granting to the strategic objectives of foreign policy of Romania. Rightfully so, it may be considered the most notable positive results after joining the European Union and NATO, because it brings our country closer to a benchmark that will involve recognize the status of a functional market economy and a consolidated democracy. This decision of the OECD Council, which we salute and for which I would like to thank the Secretary General Matias Cormann for his support and for this point, it is a new stage of a group that the Romanians have chosen when it comes to the revolution of 1989, that to be a part of the European Union, to be allies into NATO, and to set the basis of development when it comes to joining the most developed country in the world. It is a stage success because our strategic objective is to obtain the member statute of OECD. We have convoked, ever since the first day after having the joining invitation, the Interministerial Committee of OECD, and we have approved the main mandatory standards, which is an endeavor that is absolutely necessary in order to have the launching of the sheet running of Romania. We have greeted today the General Secretary with the formal letter of answer of Romania to the invitation to join, as well as the needed conditions in order to launch the process.
Today, Romania is currently in the process of accession to OECD. Today we have also launched the economic survey delivered by OECD and the National Committee on Strategy and Forecast about Romania, which introduces the current status of the Romanian economy and the solutions in order to have it modernized. Through its accession to OECD, Romania commits itself to fulfill all the criteria deriving from its membership to this select club, and we will do so as this criteria on one hand part of our nation's fiber, and on the other hand they are related to the strategic potential and the competitive advantages manifested by our country. The first criterion is the commitment towards a common set of values and principles is also derived from our status as European Union and NATO members, and from the benefits that Romania has gained since accession to these two organizations. We are talking about the principles of democracy and market economy, economic performance, proper governance and rule of law, human rights, and active participation to international and to relevant international and regional organizations, assistance, aid for development, and compliance with the OECD acquis. Romania is a country whose citizens have been fighting for democracy and freedom every time when this was needed throughout our history. And we are able to demonstrate that we cherish these values. Romania is a country that properly observes the rule of law and promotes the values of liberal democracy, also as in its capacity as the presidency of the communities of democracies. Romania is a country whose economic performance has been increasing throughout the 15 years since we have become members of the European Union, and which will be able to capitalize on the chance of getting access to almost an amount of 30 billion euros in order to have economic recovery in place from the National Plan for Recovery and Resilience, and from almost 50 billion euros from the new multi-annual financial framework. I can provide you a snapshot. Romanian GDP has overpassed 220 billion euros compared to approximately 19.8 billion euros in 2005. Let's imagine that we can introduce these numbers in a graph where you have on one hand the chapter before EU accession and 15 years after EU accession. Such values could not have been made possible without our membership to the EU, and this membership has also been facilitated by the other defining moment for our contemporary history, accession to NATO, the security umbrella that is able to provide to protect our development today more clearer than ever. Among the other criteria, such as the capacity to have a positive influence over the decisions of the structures of the organizations, or the relevance of the candidate in order to aspire to global policies. Romania has the advantage of the geographical diversity principle and has also proved that it can act as an important stakeholder supporting democratic reforms, anti-corruption and economic reforms in our region. As long as the decision to initiate negotiations for Romania's accession to OECD was a political one, the technical preparations represent a paramount effort during our pathway towards accession. This is why I'd like to express again my full commitment and the commitment of the government that I'm currently running, that the preparation of OECD accession will represent a key priority on our agenda, together with the other priorities of our foreign policy. We will focus in a very rigorous manner on the technical preparations, and in my capacity as a Prime Minister and coordinator of the Interministerial Committee, I can assure you that I will personally be following up on this preparation process. At the same time, the accession process will allow us to continue the required reforms. Thus, we will be able to capitalize on the advantages and benefits that are related to this process, starting from an improvement of our country rating to attracting more foreign direct investments and acquiring a more favorable image of Romania in front of biggest democratic economies of the world. Such instruments as those available at the European Union level, such as the European semester and the accession negotiations and the membership to OECD will open up the doors to Romania towards know-how club, that we will be able to access and where we will be able to receive assistance from in terms of the reforms that our country is implementing in the matters of public policies, government, anti-corruption reforms, fiscal policies, transport infrastructure, agriculture and education. A set of reforms which should get us closer and closer to another important objective, that of reaching economic convergence with the EU level and the adoption of the euro. We will have all the ingredients available in order to make Romania even more attractive from the institutional point of view, even more resilient in front of the shocks, and I hope so, also more tempting for the Romanians who would like to come back home. Where home also means and should mean a strengthened Romania from the democratic point of view, with an operational market economy and an influent stakeholder in the most successful organizations. Therefore, we are confronted with an intermediary success, the invitation received in order to initiate accession negotiations, and ahead of us we have the responsibility associated with a countrywide project, and I'd like to prompt all the institutional and political stakeholders to contribute for the benefit of Romanian citizens. Thank you.
Your Excellency, we have
thank you very much, Prime Minister. It's a real privilege for me as Secretary General of the OECD to be in Bucharest here today to present the OECD Economic Survey of Romania for 2022, and it's a particular privilege to be here just a few days after the Council of the OECD decided to formally open accession discussions with Romania on membership of the OECD. We know how committed Romania has been for a very long time to OECD membership. We've appreciated your consistent strength of engagement and the way you have worked with us on reforms to lift standards and to better align with OECD standards, to participate in OECD bodies over many years. And this is now an important step, I guess, to take that final step towards membership. I've appreciated the Prime Minister today handed me a letter responding to my letter earlier in the week, confirming Romania's adherence to the vision, to the values, the vision and priorities of the OECD as outlined in our vision statement, our 60th anniversary vision statement, and indeed Romania's adherence to our Ministerial Council meeting statement released in October last year. Romania has done very well over the last several decades in growing the economy, in lifting living standards, in reducing the emissions intensity of the Romanian economy. But there are still areas for improvement, and there are still some problem areas that need to be addressed. And I'm confident, and I look forward to the opportunity that working together, bringing the benefit of best practice, best policy, best practice experiences from across the OECD membership into the conversation and into the engagement with the Romanian government, that we can help deliver even better policies for better lives here in Romania. And we very much look forward to the process of engagement as part of the roadmap to accession, which will unfold over the coming weeks and months. In this survey, what we have focused on is areas for potential improvement, and they're short-term, medium and longer-term reform priorities. In the short term, it must be said, the biggest risk in Romania, as it is in countries around the world, are future new waves of infections of COVID, and indeed the need for further economic restrictions, which would be the biggest downside risk to a sustained economic recovery at this point in time. In Romania, one of the downside risks, this downside risk is particularly accentuated because Romania has a comparatively low level of vaccination. So we know that the government is very focused on this. We know that there is a broad consensus across the political spectrum in support of boosting vaccination. And I guess what I would say to the people of Romania, to those who are hesitating, do it for yourself, for your health, and for your future opportunity. Do it for your family, do it for your community, do it for your country. Get vaccinated, get boosted. It is good for your health, it's good for your future economic opportunity. Over the medium to long term, it's going to be important that the substantial funds that are available under the EU-funded Recovery and Resilience Plan are invested wisely. And that is an area that the Prime Minister and I, and together with his colleagues, we had the opportunity to discuss now in the context of the review of the Economic Survey review of Romania. And indeed, there are a number of pressures that will need to be addressed. Population aging, workforce participation levels, better access to education, in particular for those from more disadvantaged backgrounds. Educational success in Romania compared to other parts of the OECD is more significantly linked to the socio-economic background of parents. And that is an area that will need attention, and I know that the government is very focused on that. There are many other areas of reform that are being addressed in the report. We've had the opportunity to go through it in some detail now during the meeting, which I believe was publicly broadcast for the most part. So I'm not going to go through all of the specifics here again, but let me just say, we very much appreciate Romania's enthusiasm to become an active contributor to the OECD family. Romania has come a very long way. Romania has been a very positive partner for us for a long time. We very much look forward to working through this process ahead, which will, we hope, lead to further substantial reform which will improve the opportunities and the living standards for the people here in Romania. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Luisa Giradă, Romanian Television, Public One, please.
Bună ziua, o întrebare pentru domnul Matias Cormann. În ce an ar putea România deveni membru al OCDE și care sunt acele reforme, acele lucruri esențiale pe care trebuie să le facem pentru ca acest lucru să se întâmple, să aderăm la OCDE?
To happen for Romania to have a full membership of OECD?
I'm not in a position to put a specific date on it. What I would say is that it will go as swiftly as possible and take as long as necessary. I mean, Romania already adheres to 53 OECD standards. It's a participant in many OECD bodies. We know each other well. What will now happen is a thorough review through 20 technical committees of the OECD, really reviewing very thoroughly all of the policies and practices in Romania that we believe can and should be further improved in order to align policies, practices and arrangements in Romania with those that apply across the OECD. And it really depends on how the process evolves from here. The Prime Minister has indicated to me that he and his government will be very focused on engaging with us very swiftly, and certainly from our side we will work through things as efficiently as possible, but to a degree. I mean, this is now a technical process. And in terms of your second question, beyond the areas that we've covered in the OECD Economic Survey of Romania, which are there for you to see, it will really depend on what the process identifies. I mean, there's a range of areas where we believe that we need to have a particularly close look at, and to the benefit of Romania and the Romanian people, work with the government here to take these things forward. I should say, and I should have said in my introductory remarks, one of the things that we very much appreciate is the broad political support from across the political spectrum here in Romania for Romania's aspiration to be a member of the OECD, and that gives us a lot of confidence to work through this process with our partners here in Romania.
Thank you. Mrs. Janina Vatkovic, RTV, please.
Bună ziua, v-aș întreba în contextul în care vorbim...
on the background
Domnule Matias,
which,
în contextul în care există aceste probleme de securitate la granița cu Ucraina, aș întreba dacă există posibilitatea ca intenția și încrederea investitorilor străini de a veni pe piața din România poate fi într-un fel afectată. Mulțumesc.
Invest here in Romania might be affected.
Well, I mean, the geopolitical environment is always an important factor. I mean, there's no question. I mean, but that goes beyond the scope, I guess, of where the OECD can add much value. Beyond noting that the point that you make, is a valid point, that the geopolitical environment and evolving geopolitical circumstances have an impact. But of course, Romania is entrenched, in a number of very important structures with the European Union and NATO, and all of that, positions Romania very well to deal with some of those challenges. But it's probably a question more appropriately addressed to the Prime Minister.
Okay, thank you. Anca Orhean, Digi24.
Bună ziua, aș avea o întrebare pentru premierul Nicolae Ciucă. V-aș întreba pe un subiect mai specific puțin, pentru că se discută și în acest raport despre problema sustenabilității sistemului de pensii până la urmă în viitor și despre o posibilă desființare a pensiilor speciale. Știm că este și o dezbatere în plan intern pe acest subiect. V-aș întreba cum vedeți rezolvarea și când o vedeți.
Vă mulțumesc. Înainte de a vă răspunde, aș vrea să adaug, pentru că avem aici alături de noi pe domnul ministru de externe Bogdan Aurescu și pe domnul ambasador al țării noastre la Paris, domnul Luca Niculescu. La început i-am mulțumit domnului secretar general și echipei dumnealui pentru sprijinul acordat, astfel încât să avem un final de etapă și să primim scrisoarea de invitare pentru aderare. Cred că este foarte important și vreau să o fac în fața tuturor, și anume să mulțumesc echipei care s-a implicat în mod deosebit să realizeze elementele de aliniere tehnică de la nivelul instituțiilor statului român cu staful tehnic al OCDE.
With the technical staff of OECD. I'd like to thank them. Personally, I'd like to thank State Secretary Feruță. He's not here, but he was the technical coordinator of this entire activity. And of course, I'd like to thank the entire staff involved within the presidential administration and within the Romanian government, which dealt directly with all these take actions. The reform of the pension system is an important objective, and I have to share with you that in the government we should pay enough attention so that to the possibility for Romanians to afford themselves a decent standard of living after a life spent working. Yesterday we had the first meeting of the Interministerial Committee for the National Reform and Resilience Plan. One of the most important topics brought to discussion was the reform of the pension system. Therefore, this is a target included in the National Reform Plan, and this is what the government should be doing in order to be able to effectively use the funds available from the European Union. Therefore, we will provide our full attention to this matter so that this reform should be fulfilled.
Alex Vlădescu, Antena Free.
Bună ziua! Una dintre recomandările raportului realizate către cei de la OECD arată foarte clar că ar trebui majorate taxele pe proprietate, tocmai pentru a reduce deficitul bugetar, când s-ar putea întâmpla acest lucru cel mai devreme și care ar fi noile plafoane. Așa cum ne-am angajat și am spus și în momentul în care am prezentat programul de guvernare în Parlament, în centrul programului de guvernare se află cetățeanul român. Ca atare,
the very focus of our program is the Romanian citizens. Therefore, I'd like to underline that currently we focus first and foremost on increasing the living standards for Romanian citizens.
Cetățenii vor plăti, vom acorda tot ceea ce este la îndemâna noastră ca cetățenii să plătească taxele care și le pot permite. Ca atare, la nivelul Guvernului, vom face tot ceea ce este omenește posibil pentru a continua să creștem investițiile și în felul acesta să asigurăm o creștere economică, iar cetățenii români să poată să beneficieze de pe urma lor. Vă mulțumesc.
Mulțumesc și eu, domnule prim-ministru. Domnule prim-ministru, domnule secretar general, Your Excellencies, our press conference is ending now. Thank you so much. Mulțumesc foarte mult.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Poate o strângere de mână pentru...
Desigur. No, sir. We have to... Thank you.